Feel the real fear with us.
Welcome to Alone. Here, we uncover chilling stories and unsettling events that blur the line between truth and night. Every tale you hear is inspired by real encounters, whispered secrets, and shadows that refuse to fade. If you believe in the unknown, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and join us, because tonight's story might be true. Let's begin the show. Good evening and welcome back to Alone, the podcast where we explore the darkest corners of the unexplained, the unsettling whispers from the edge of reality. Tonight, we have a story that arrived in our inbox just last week, submitted by a listener who simply identified himself as JT. He prefaced his email with a single, chilling sentence. Some roads are best left untraveled, some calls best left unanswered. What you're about to hear is his account, verbatim, of an encounter that blurred the lines between the living and something else, on a stretch of asphalt known only as Highway 65. So dim the lights, perhaps pull that blanket a little tighter and prepare yourselves. Because once you hear this story, you might think twice about picking up that phone when it rings from an unknown number, especially if you're driving alone, late at night, and the world outside has gone utterly silent. It was a Tuesday night, or rather, the very early hours of Wednesday morning, the kind of night where the moon played hide-and-seek behind thick, bruised clouds, casting the world in a perpetual twilight. JT was on a long haul, driving his 18-wheeler from Des Moines, Iowa, all the way to Denver, Colorado. He'd done this route countless times, knew every pothole, every dodgy diner, every stretch of road where the radio signal died. But tonight felt different. The air was heavy, thick with an almost tangible humidity that presaged a storm, yet not a single drop of rain had fallen. The kind of oppressive stillness that makes the hairs on your arms stand on end, even without a breeze. He passed through Omaha hours ago, the city lights fading into a distant glow in his rearview mirror. Now, he was deep into rural Nebraska, that vast, flat expanse where cornfields stretch to the horizon and towns are little more than a gas station and a blinking yellow light. His rig, a weathered freightliner named Betsy, rumbled on, the rhythmic hum of the engine and the tires on the asphalt the only constant in the growing silence. Even the usual chatter from the CB radio had died down. Just static, then nothing. He checked his watch. 2:17 a.m. He was making good time, but the fatigue was starting to set in. He decided to push for another hour, maybe two, then find a truck stop to catch a few hours of sleep. He had a thermos of lukewarm coffee, which tasted more like regret than caffeine, but it was all he had. The solitude of the highway at this hour was usually a comfort, a chance for reflection. Tonight, it felt like an isolating cage. That's when his phone rang. It wasn't his work phone, the one that pinged with dispatch updates. This was his personal cell, tucked away in the cup holder. He glanced at the screen, expecting to see his wife's name, maybe a buddy from back home. But the display showed unknown number. He usually let those go to voicemail, spam calls, telemarketers, or just a wrong number. But something, a tiny, insistent prickle at the back of his neck, made him hesitate. It was an odd time for anyone to call, let alone an unknown number. He considered it for a moment, the phone vibrating softly against the plastic. Curiosity, or perhaps just the sheer monotony of the drive, got the better of him. He tapped the green icon. "Hello," he said, his voice a little rough from disuse. There was a pause, a breath of silence on the other end, so profound it felt heavier than the silence in his cab. Then a voice, barely a whisper, thin and reedy, like wind whistling through dry reeds. It was a woman's voice, but distorted, as if speaking from a great distance or through a broken machine. "Help me," the voice rasped. JT's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He frowned, leaning closer to the phone. "Who is this? Where are you?" Another pause, longer this time. He could hear faint, indistinct sounds in the background, a low rumble, almost like distant thunder, but too rhythmic, too mechanical. And then a sound that made his stomach clench, a high-pitched, almost animalistic whimper cut short. I'm on Highway 65, the voice whispered again, each word an immense effort. Near the old bridge. Highway 65. JT knew that road. He was on Highway 65, and the old bridge, he remembered it. A rusted skeletal structure, long abandoned, running parallel to the newer, wider concrete bridge he was currently crossing over. It spanned a shallow, muddy river, flanked by dense, gnarled trees that looked like skeletal fingers against the bruised sky. He passed it maybe 10, 15 minutes ago. He even remembered thinking how eerie it looked in the dim light. "Which bridge?" JT asked. his heart starting to thump an uneven rhythm against his ribs. "Are you in trouble? Do you need an ambulance?" He's coming back," the voice choked out, laced with pure terror. "He's in the truck." JT slammed on his brakes, the huge truck shuddering violently as he pulled over onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched under the tires. His mind raced. A woman in distress alone on Highway 65 near the old bridge. And someone he was in the truck. Was she being held captive? Was this some kind of sick prank? But the terror in her voice, the almost unbearable fragility of her words, it felt too real. "Listen to me," JT said, trying to keep his voice steady, authoritative. "I'm a truck driver. I just passed that bridge. Are you in a vehicle? Can you tell me what kind of truck?" It's old," she gasped, her breath ragged. "Dark green, rusty, and in the lights they flicker." JT squinted at his rearview mirror, then craned his neck to look back down the highway. Nothing, just the long, empty stretch of asphalt, disappearing into the hazy darkness. No old, dark green, rusty truck with flickering lights. He was alone. "Where exactly are you, ma'am?" he pressed, his voice rising in urgency. "I can turn around, I can call for help. Just tell me where you are." He's here," she whispered, her voice dissolving into a choked sob. "He knows I call. He's going to—" The sentence ended abruptly, cut off by a sudden muffled shriek, like someone clamping a hand over a mouth. Then a sickening thud, followed by a heavy silence that stretched, interminable, on the other end of the line. JT waited. He held the phone to his ear, his breath caught in his throat. He could hear nothing, not even the static from before, just the distant, almost imperceptible hum of the highway and the furious pounding of his own heart. "Hello," he said, his voice barely a croak. "Are you there? What happened? Hello?" Silent, absolute terrifying silence. He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at the screen. The call was still connected. The timer was still running. He brought it back to his ear, but there was nothing. No dial tone, no operator, just that hollow, empty void. He tried to speak again, but the words wouldn't come. His mouth was dry, his tongue thick. Then he heard it, faint, incredibly faint, but undeniably there. A low, guttural growl followed by a wet, sickening chewing sound. It sounded impossibly close, yet utterly out of place. It was the sound of something feasting, and it was coming from the phone. JT hurled the phone across the cab, sending it clattering against the passenger door. He snatched his hand back, as if the device itself had become contaminated. He sat there, trembling, his eyes darting wildly into the inky blackness beyond his headlights. The cornfields, previously a monotonous backdrop, now seemed to press in, their tall stalks rustling like unseen figures in the non-existent wind. Every shadow held a potential threat. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a footstep. He fumbled for his CB radio, desperate for any human voice, any sign of life. He flicked the switch, adjusted the squelch. Nothing, just dead air. The sheer isolation of the moment was crushing. He was truly, utterly alone, with the chilling echo of a woman's scream and a monstrous feeding sound ringing in his ears. He took a few deep, ragged breaths, trying to rationalize what he'd just experienced. A prank call, clearly. Some sick bastard playing games. But the sheer terror in her voice and that sound, no, it couldn't have been a prank. Not with that level of raw, visceral fear. He picked up his phone cautiously. The screen was still on. The call was still connected. He pressed the red end call button, but nothing happened. It was frozen. The timer continued to tick upward, logging the duration of this horrifying, silent call. He tried to restart the phone, but it wouldn't respond. It was like the call had taken root, burrowing deep into the device, refusing to be disconnected. He put the phone down, far away from him on the passenger seat. His eyes scanned the rearview mirror again, a cold dread coiling in his gut. What if it wasn't a prank? What if she was back there? What if he was still there? And what if he knew JT had answered? He started the engine, the roar of the diesel a welcome, if temporary, shield against the encroaching silence. He pulled back onto the highway, his foot heavy on the accelerator. He needed to get away from this stretch of road. He needed to find a populated area, a truck stop, anything. As he drove, his eyes constantly flickered to the rearview mirror. He saw nothing but his own headlights illuminating the empty road behind him. But the image of that old, dark green, rusty truck with flickering lights was burned into his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was following him, lurking just beyond the reach of his lights. The miles blurred. He pushed the truck faster than he usually would. the speedometer needle hovering at the edge of the legal limit. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every tree branch seemed to writhe in the periphery of his vision. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. And then he saw it. In his rearview mirror, far back, almost indistinguishable from the gloom, was a pair of headlights. They were faint, flickering, almost like faulty electrical connections. And they were coming closer. JT's blood ran cold. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone what those lights belonged to. The old, dark green, rusty truck, the one the woman had described, the one with him inside. He pushed the accelerator to the floor, the big engine groaning in protest. Betsy was a workhorse, not a race car, but he squeezed every ounce of speed he could out of her. The road ahead was still dark, still empty. The storm had still not broken, but the air felt even heavier now, charged with a malevolent energy. The flickering headlights behind him grew larger, closer. They weren't gaining on him at an impossible speed, but they were inexorably closing the distance. It was like watching a slow, inevitable predator stalking its prey. He glanced at his phone again, lying still on the passenger seat. The call timer was still running, clocking in over 15 minutes now. The connection was still live. Was it a beacon? Was it how he was tracking him? He snatched the phone, his hands shaking. He tried to end the call again, to power it off, to throw it out the window, but the screen remained frozen, locked onto that endless call. He couldn't disconnect. He was tethered to whatever nightmare was unfolding behind him. He could see the truck now in his mirrors. It was exactly as she had described. An ancient, dark green semi, rust streaking its faded paintwork like dried blood. Its headlights pulsed irregularly, casting grotesque, shifting shadows on the road. There were no discernible windows, just dark, empty voids where the glass should have been. And as it drew closer, he could make out a vague, shadowy figure in the driver's seat, an indistinct mass that seemed to fill the entire cab. JT's breath hitched. He wasn't just being followed, he was being hunted. He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror. The old truck was gaining on him steadily now, its flickering lights casting an unholy glow on the asphalt. He could feel its presence, a cold, oppressive weight pressing down on him, even through the thick metal of his cab. He looked for an exit, a turnoff, anything. But Highway 65 stretched out, a black ribbon through an endless, featureless landscape, just cornfields, trees, and the growing dread in his heart. Then the static returned to his phone, not the faint, distant static from before, but a harsh, grating sound like grinding teeth. And beneath it, just barely audible, the reedy, distorted voice again. He's going to take you too, the woman whispered, her voice weaker, more broken than before. He doesn't want anyone to know. JT almost dropped the phone. She was still there, or something of her was. Her voice sounded like it was being dragged from the abyss. "Who are you?" JT gasped, his voice tight with fear. "What does he want?" A long, agonizing pause. The static intensified, crackling like a dying fire. Then a new sound emerged. A low, guttural growl, similar to what he'd heard before, but infinitely closer and undeniably male. It was deep, resonant, and filled with a chilling, predatory hunger. It wasn't coming from the phone's speaker. It was coming from behind him. JT's eyes snapped to his rearview mirror. The old truck was no longer behind him. It was alongside him, practically bumper to bumper. And the shadowy figure in the driver's seat, it wasn't just a shadow anymore. He could discern details. A gaunt, almost skeletal face, eyes like glowing embers in the darkness. A wide, lipless grin that seemed to stretch impossibly far across its face. And the vehicle itself, it was ancient, impossibly rusted, its paint peeling like diseased skin. But there was something else. Hanging from the side mirrors, swaying slightly in the non-existent wind, were small, dried, almost shriveled pieces of what looked unmistakably like flesh. He screamed. A raw, terrified sound ripped from his throat. He swerved, trying to put distance between his rig and the monstrous vehicle. The old truck mirrored his movement with terrifying precision, effortlessly keeping pace. Then from the old truck's cab, a massive, clawed hand, impossibly long and gnarled, reached out. It wasn't human. It was covered in coarse, dark hair, with talons instead of fingernails. It slapped against the side of JT's cab, a sickening thwack that vibrated through the metal. JT felt a jolt of pure adrenaline. He pressed his foot harder on the accelerator, his eyes wide with unadulterated terror. He glanced at his phone, still buzzing with the live, silent call. It was almost mocking him, a testament to his trapped state. The voice on the phone, the woman's voice, returned. It was a desperate, almost inaudible wail now. He wants your silence. He feeds on the fear. As if in response, the growl from the truck beside him deepened, becoming a throaty, malevolent chuckle. The skeletal figure in the driver's seat turned its head, its glowing eyes locking onto JT's. A wave of bone-chilling cold washed over him, a sense of absolute despair. He could feel the heat radiating from the old truck, a strange, unnatural warmth like decaying flesh. The air in his cab grew thick, suffocating. He choked, gasping for breath. The flickering headlights of the other truck seemed to penetrate his very being, burning into his mind. He knew he couldn't outrun it, not in Betsy. Not against that. He made a desperate, split-second decision. He would swerve, crash, anything to escape this living nightmare. He yanked the wheel hard to the right, aiming for the ditch, hopping to destabilize the other truck, or at least put an end to his own terror. But as he began to turn, the old truck suddenly accelerated, surging forward with impossible speed. It cut him off, directly in front of him, forcing him to slam on his brakes. The air brakes shrieked, protesting violently. JT's body was thrown forward against his seatbelt, the force of the stop almost snapping his neck. He looked up, heart hammering against his ribs. The old truck was directly in front of him, stopped dead in the middle of the highway. Its taillights, if they could even be called that, were a dull, pulsing red like bloodshot eyes. JT sat there, frozen, hands still clamped to the steering wheel, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. The silence was deafening, absolute, broken only by the frantic pounding of his own heart. The old truck sat motionless in front of him, a monstrous silhouette against the bruised pre-dawn sky. He could see the driver's side door of the old truck slowly, creakily open. A long, impossibly thin leg, clad in what looked like tattered, grimy denim, emerged. Then another. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the figure stepped out. It was tall, impossibly so, its frame gaunt and stooped, like a scarecrow brought to life by malevolent forces. The flickering headlights of the truck cast long, grotesque shadows that writhed and stretched across the asphalt. The figure turned, slowly, deliberately, its head tilting to reveal that skeletal face once more. The eyes, those glowing embers, fixed on JT, there was no mistaking the malice, the ancient, hungry evil that resided within them. And then he saw it clearly. The thing was holding something long and metallic, a crowbar, or perhaps something much, much older. JT fumbled for his CB radio again, but his hands were shaking too violently. He tried his phone, but it was still locked, the call timer still ticking, a grim counter to his dwindling moments. The creature began to walk towards Betsy, its gait uneven, a dragging, shuffling sound accompanying each step. It moved with a disturbing blend of slow, deliberate menace and an underlying, unnatural speed. JT could hear the gravel crunching under its feet, each sound amplified in the suffocating silence. He yanked at the door handle, but it was locked. He tried to start the engine, but his hands were shaking so badly he fumbled with the keys. The growl was back, closer now, a low, guttural vibration that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath him. The creature was at his door. He could see its reflection in the side mirror, a distorted, nightmarish image. Its face, partially obscured by shadow, was a mask of stretched skin and bare, needle-sharp teeth. Its mouth was a gaping maw, and from it issued a series of low, wet, smacking sounds, like it was tasting the air, tasting his fear. He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing he could disappear, wishing this was all a terrible, waking nightmare. He heard a soft tap on the window. He opened his eyes slowly, reluctantly. The creature's face was pressed against the glass, inches from his own. Its glowing eyes burned into his, and a faint, foul odor like stagnant water and decaying meat wafted into the cab. The creature raised the metallic object it held, and in the faint light, JT saw that it wasn't a crowbar. It was an impossibly long, rusted bone, sharpened to a cruel point, its surface stained with what looked like dried, dark blood. It brought the bone down with terrifying force, smashing it against the driver's side window. The reinforced glass spiderwebbed but didn't shatter, not immediately. JT screamed, a raw, desperate sound. He kicked at the door, trying to force it open, but it was useless. He was trapped. The creature brought the bone down again and again, each strike sending shockwaves through the cab, each crack in the glass growing wider. The voice on his phone, the woman's voice, was a desperate, panicked shriek now, echoing in his ear, a spectral warning. Don't look at him. Don't let him see your fear. But it was too late. JT's eyes were locked with the creature's, unable to break away. He felt a chilling sense of profound despair, a recognition that this was his end. The creature's glowing eyes seemed to drink in his terror, to feed on it. Its smile widened, if such a monstrous contortion could be called a smile, revealing more of those needle-sharp teeth. With a final, shattering blow, the window exploded inward, spraying JT with shards of glass. The creature's arm, impossibly long and sinewy, snaked through the opening, its clawed hand reaching for him. He recoiled, pressing himself against the far side of the cab, but there was nowhere to go. The clawed hand clamped around his arm, its grip surprisingly gentle at first, then tightening with an agonizing, bone-crushing force. He cried out, feeling his flesh tear, his muscles strain. The creature began to pull him, slowly, inexorably, towards the broken window. He struggled, thrashed, but it was like fighting against a steel trap. He could feel the cold night air on his face, mingling with the stench of decay. He could hear the creature's raspy, wet breathing, close to his ear. And then, just as his shoulder cleared the shattered window frame, just as he was about to be pulled out into the night, into the clutches of that thing, a blinding flash of light exploded behind the creature. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure agony and rage, recoiling from the sudden light and the furious downpour that had instantly erupted. Its grip on JT loosened, and he fell back into the cab, gasping for air, clutching his bleeding arm. Through the rain-streaked, broken window, he saw the creature stumble, clutching at its face, its body writhing as if in searing pain. The headlights of the old truck flickered violently, then died, plunging the monstrous vehicle into near darkness, a hulking shadow against the driving rain. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and fled. It lumbered back to its truck, its movements frantic and desperate. It clambered inside, the driver's side door slamming shut with a mournful creak. JT watched, stunned, as the old truck's engine roared to life. Its flickering taillights reappeared. Then, with a speed that defied its appearance, it spun around and sped off down Highway 65, disappearing into the torrential rain and the inky blackness from which it had emerged. JT lay there, slumped against the seat, his body trembling uncontrollably. His arm throbbed, a searing pain, but he was alive. He was still in his cab. He looked at his phone, still clutched in his hand. The call timer was still running. It now read 28 minutes and 47 seconds. He stared at it, a desperate, almost insane urge to end the call, to sever the connection to that nightmare. He was bleeding badly. He ripped a strip of cloth from his shirt and tied it tightly around his arm, trying to staunch the flow. He started the engine, his hand still shaking, and cautiously pulled back onto the highway. The storm was still raging, the wipers barely keeping up with the deluge. He drove for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, until he saw the faint glow of lights in the distance. A gas station, a motel, a sign of civilization. He pulled Betsy into the parking lot of a brightly lit truck stop, the kind with a greasy spoon diner attached. He practically stumbled out of his cab, half delirious from shock and blood loss. The gas station attendant, a sleepy-eyed kid who looked barely old enough to drive, saw his injured arm and the shattered window. He immediately called the police and an ambulance. JT told his story to the police, to the paramedics. They listened with varying degrees of skepticism and concern. They examined his truck, noted the broken window, the blood on the seat. They found no evidence of another vehicle, no trace of the old truck he described, no other reports of anything unusual on Highway 65. The only thing they couldn't explain was the perfect, circular puncture marks on his arm, where the creature's talons had pierced his skin. They looked almost branded, and the almost impossible clean break of the window, as if a precisely aimed object had struck it. JT was treated for his injuries, given a sedative, and released. He didn't drive for months after that. He couldn't. Every shadow, every distant hum of a truck engine sent shivers down his spine. The image of that skeletal face, those burning eyes, was seared into his memory. He eventually returned to trucking, but he never drove on Highway 65 again. Not a single mile. He couldn't bring himself to do it, and he never answered another unknown number. But the story doesn't quite end there. JT told me one more detail, something he'd kept to himself until now. A few weeks after the incident, once the physical wounds had started to heal, he noticed something strange about his phone, the one that had been locked on that horrifying call. It wouldn't hold a charge anymore, not for long anyway, and sometimes late at night when everything else was silent, he would hear it, a faint, almost imperceptible ringing, not from a call, not from a notification, but as if the phone itself was trying to connect, trying to call him. And when he checked the screen, even when it was supposed to be off. A single glowing symbol would appear, faint but unmistakable. A small, almost imperceptible symbol, shaped like an old, dark green truck. He threw the phone away, buried it deep in his backyard, convinced it was still a link, a conduit to that thing from Highway 65. But sometimes, he swears, on the stillest nights when the wind whispers through the cornfields, he hears a distant, mournful foghorn-like sound. And in the dead of the silence that follows, he sometimes hears a faint, reedy whisper carried on the breeze, just at the edge of hearing, saying, "He knows you listen. Subscribe now." Welcome, dear listeners, to another late-night descent into the darker corners of human experience. Tonight, we're not just scratching the surface of fear, we're diving headfirst into a chilling account, a story so unsettling, it might just make you rethink that next business trip, that next overnight stay in a faceless, sterile room. This isn't a campfire tale, folks. This is a first-person testament to something truly other. Tonight's narrative, submitted by a listener who wishes to remain anonymous for reasons you will soon understand, is titled "The Man in the Hotel Mirror." It started, as these things often do, with something mundane, a work conference, a dull, necessary evil in a city I'd never visited, a city that blurred into 1,000 other cities from the window of a mid-range chain hotel. Room 413. I remember the number clearly, etched into my memory like a scar. It was late when I checked in, past midnight. The lobby was empty, the air still and heavy with that peculiar scent of hotel, a mix of industrial cleaner, stale coffee, and a faint, indefinable sweetness like decaying flowers. The night clerk, a young man with tired eyes and a name tag that read Kevin, barely looked up as he handed me the key card. "4th floor, down the hall to your left." His voice was flat, almost robotic. I didn't think much of it then. Just another weary soul earning his keep. The elevator ride was silent, punctuated only by the soft hum of the machinery and the clink of my suitcase handle. The corridor on the 4th floor was long, dimly lit, and utterly devoid of light. The carpet, a dizzying pattern of burgundy and beige, seemed to stretch into infinity. I found room 413. The card slid in, the light flashed green, and I pushed open the heavy door, stepping into the kind of temporary dwelling that feels both anonymous and strangely intimate. It was a standard room. 2 queen beds, a desk, a TV mounted on the wall, and a small armchair by the window that overlooked a street lamp illuminating a patch of concrete below. And of course, the bathroom. The first thing I always do is check the bathroom. It's a habit, I suppose. A quick assessment of cleanliness, water pressure, the essentials. I flipped on the light. The fluorescent glow hummed to life, bathing the small space in an unforgiving, stark light. The usual amenities, small soaps, tiny shampoo bottles. And then there it was, the mirror. It was a large, unframed mirror taking up almost the entire wall above the vanity. And in it, I saw myself, just me, tired, rumpled, a bit disheveled from the journey. I ran a hand through my hair, splashing some cool water on my face. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so I thought. I unpacked quickly, set my alarm for the morning, and decided to call it a night. The conference started early. I slipped under the covers, the sheets cool and crisp against my skin. Sleep didn't come easily. The new surroundings, the unfamiliar bed, the faint murmur of the city outside, it all conspired to keep my mind buzzing. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours. At some point, I must have drifted off because I remember a sudden, jarring awakening. I don't know what woke me. No sound, no sudden movement, just an abrupt snapping back to consciousness, a prickle of unease that crawled up my spine. My eyes fluttered open in the dark. The room was bathed in the faint, ambient glow from the city lights filtering through the curtains. And then I saw him. In the bathroom mirror, he was standing there just behind my reflection. A man, tall, gaunt, dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned suit, dark and ill-fitting. His face was pale, almost translucent, with hollow eyes that seemed to bore directly into me. His lips were thin, pulled back in a semblance of a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A smile that was all teeth and no joy. My heart hammered against my ribs. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, convinced it was a trick of the light, a figment of my sleep-deprived imagination. But he was still there, motionless, staring, not at the bathroom, but directly at me, through my reflection. A gasp caught in my throat. I tried to move, to sit up, but a strange paralysis had gripped me. My limbs felt heavy, unwilling to obey. All I could do was stare, my gaze locked on his spectral image. He was utterly still, a silent sentinel in the mirrored world. And then, very slowly, his head tilted. Just a fraction, an almost imperceptible movement, but enough to send a fresh wave of ice-cold dread through me. It was as if he was acknowledging my terror, as if he enjoyed it. I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to look away, to break the connection, but I was utterly captivated, mesmerized by the ghastly figure in the glass. The silence in the room was absolute, deafening. Even the faint city hum seemed to have died. All that existed was me, this hotel room, and the horrifying specter in the mirror. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute or two, he faded. Not with a dramatic flash or a swirling mist, but subtly, like a shadow lengthening at dusk, then dissolving into the deepening night. One moment he was there, solid and terrifying. The next, the space behind my reflection was empty. Only my own wide, terrified eyes stared back at me. I shot upright in bed, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Sweat plastered my hair to my forehead. I scrambled out of bed, my legs shaky, and stumbled towards the bathroom. I flipped on the light, blinding myself for a moment. The mirror was just a mirror, reflecting only the sterile, white-tiled space. There was nothing. No man, no lingering shadow, no trace of the horror I had just witnessed. I splashed water on my face again, hopping to wash away the lingering nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It had been too vivid, too real. The cold dread that still gripped me was proof of that. I stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection, scrutinizing every inch of the mirror, half expecting him to reappear. But he didn't. Sleep was impossible after that. I spent the rest of the night huddled in bed, the lights on, my eyes darting nervously towards the bathroom door. Every creak of the building, every whisper of the wind outside, sent a jolt of fear through me. When my alarm finally blared, it was a welcome sound, a signal that the night was over and the mundane world of work awaited. The conference was a blur. My mind was still reeling from the previous night's encounter. I tried to rationalize it. Jet lag, stress, a vivid dream induced by an unfamiliar environment. But deep down, I knew it had been real. That evening, after a full day of forced smiles and corporate jargon, I returned to room 413 with a sense of trepidation. My hand trembled as I inserted the key card. I pushed the door open, my gaze immediately drawn to the bathroom. The light was off, the door slightly ajar, a black rectangle beckoned. I took a deep breath, walked in, and flipped on the light. The mirror stared back, empty. I showered quickly, keeping my back to the mirror, feeling an irrational prickle on my skin as if I was being watched. I avoided looking directly into it while brushing my teeth, instead focusing on my hands. It felt ridiculous, childish even, but the memory of those hollow eyes was too fresh. I decided to leave the bathroom light on that night, just a little extra protection. I hoped that the constant illumination would deter whatever malevolent presence might be lurking. I also placed my suitcase in front of the bathroom door, just in case, a desperate attempt to create a barrier, however flimsy. I lay in bed, the television playing quietly, a mindless sitcom providing a comforting human sound. My eyes were fixed on the strip of light under the bathroom door. I fought against sleep, trying to keep myself awake, but exhaustion eventually won. I awoke with a jolt just as before. That same inexplicable snap back to consciousness, the same chilling sense of being observed. My eyes, still heavy with sleep, gravitated towards the bathroom. The light was still on, and he was there. This time he wasn't just standing behind my reflection. He was closer. His face, still pale and gaunt, was pressed against the glass as if trying to push through the barrier of the mirror. His eyes, those dark, hollow abysses, were even more intense, burning with an unnatural light. And that smile, it was wider now, a grotesque rictus that stretched his thin lips, revealing a mouthful of uneven, yellowish teeth. A choked cry escaped my lips. This was worse. Much, much worse. The paralysis was back, more potent than before. I couldn't move a muscle. I couldn't even blink. My breath hitched in my throat. His head tilted again, a slow, deliberate movement that was excruciating to witness. And then his lips moved, soundlessly. I couldn't hear anything, but I could clearly see the words forming on his face. "You saw me." The words resonated not in my ears, but in my mind, a cold, rasping whisper that burrowed deep into my consciousness. My mind screamed in terror. He knew I had seen him. He was acknowledging it, and that acknowledgement felt like a predator recognizing its prey. Slowly, agonizingly, his right hand lifted. It was bony, with long, skeletal fingers tipped with dark, almost black nails. He pressed it against the mirror, his palm flattening against the glass. And as he did, A faint, almost imperceptible ripple spread across the surface of the mirror, like water disturbed by a stone. My reflection behind him distorted slightly, wavering for a split second. My own face seemed to stretch and contort, mirroring the man's grotesque smile. Then, just as before, he began to recede. His hand pulled back, his face slowly detaching from the glass, his form becoming less defined, more ethereal. The smile was the last thing to fade, lingering like a foul taste before he dissolved completely, leaving only my own terrified face staring back at me. This time there was no doubt, no way to rationalize it away. This was real. I was being haunted, and he was getting closer. I scrambled out of bed, heart hammering, every nerve screaming. I ripped my suitcase away from the door, almost tripping in my haste, and fled the bathroom, slamming the door shut behind me. I pushed a chair against it, then another, piling everything I could find against the barrier, a futile attempt to keep him out. I called the front desk. My voice was trembling, barely a whisper. "Hello? Yes, this is room 413. I need to change rooms immediately." The voice on the other end, still Kevin's, was just as flat as before. "Is there a problem, sir?" "Yes, there's a problem. There's something in my room I need to move." A pause, a long, unsettling pause. Then Kevin's voice, a little softer, a little more knowing. "Sir, we're fully booked tonight. There are no other rooms available." "No other rooms? That's impossible. This is a large hotel." I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "I'm sorry, sir. Management policies. No other rooms. We can offer you a complimentary breakfast voucher for your inconvenience." A complimentary breakfast voucher. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, a hysterical, choked sound. What good was a pastry when a ghost was trying to claw its way out of my mirror? "Look," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "Can you just send someone up? Security, maintenance, just someone." Another pause. "Sir, if you feel unsafe, we advise you to contact local authorities. The hotel is not responsible for." He trailed off and I heard a click. He had hung up. Despair turned to pure terror. I was trapped in room 413 with him. The rest of the night was a blur of fear and paranoia. I sat in the armchair by the window, clutching my phone, ready to dial 911 at the slightest provocation. My eyes never left the bathroom door, even with the chairs piled against it. I didn't dare turn off the lights. The television played on, its cheerful chatter a stark contrast to the icy dread in my heart. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in a weak, watery gray, I felt a surge of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees. I quickly packed my bags, not bothering to fold anything, just stuffing it all in. I didn't care about the conference anymore. I didn't care about anything except getting out of that room. I left the hotel without a word to anyone, not even bothering to check out properly. I just dropped the key card on the deserted front desk and walked out into the cool morning air, breathing a shaky sigh of relief. The city, which had felt so menacing just hours before, now seemed like a haven of normalcy. I never went back to that hotel. I changed my work travel policies, insisted on smaller boutique hotels, anything to avoid the faceless chain. I even started to avoid mirrors, finding myself taking quick, furtive glances, or just avoiding my reflection altogether. The memory of the man, his hollow eyes and grotesque smile, was seared into my mind. For a few weeks, I thought it was over. A traumatic experience, yes, but one that was fading into the past. I tried to convince myself that it had been an isolated incident, a strange convergence of stress and an overactive imagination. Then the dream started. Not nightmares, not exactly. More like lingering, unsettling echoes of the man. I'd see him in the periphery of my sleep, a fleeting shadow, a glimpse of those eyes. And sometimes I'd wake up with the distinct sensation of being watched, a cold prickle on my skin. One evening, about a month after the hotel incident, I was getting ready for bed. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror at home, brushing my teeth. It was a familiar ritual, one I'd performed countless times. I met my own gaze, a quick, habitual check of my appearance. And then I saw it, just for a split second, a flicker. In the very depths of my own eyes reflected back at me, I saw a faint, almost transparent image. It was him, the man, his pale face, his hollow eyes, his thin, cruel smile. It was like a ghost image, superimposed over my own reflection, gone almost as soon as it appeared. My toothbrush clattered into the sink. My blood ran cold. He wasn't gone. He hadn't stayed in room 413. He had followed me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't tied to the hotel. He wasn't a resident ghost of room 413. He was tied to me, to the fact that I had seen him. Panic seized me. I backed away from the mirror, my heart hammering. I tried to calm myself, to rationalize it away again. My mind playing tricks. A residual trauma, but the cold dread that was slowly becoming a constant companion told me otherwise. I started to cover my mirrors at night. It sounds insane, I know, but the thought of waking up and seeing him there, peering out from my own reflection, was unbearable. I used sheets, towels, anything I could find to obscure the glass. My apartment started to look like a house preparing for a funeral, shrouded in white. My friends and family noticed my increasingly erratic behavior, the jumpiness, the constant exhaustion, the way I would flinch away from reflective surfaces. I tried to make excuses, stress from work, a new allergy, but I couldn't tell them the truth. Who would believe me? They'd think I was losing my mind. One day, I was at a coffee shop, trying to distract myself with a book. I glanced up, my eyes unfocused, and caught my reflection in the window. And there he was, standing right behind me, clear as day, his gaunt face, that chilling smile. He wasn't inside the window, he was in my reflection. A silent, spectral hitchhiker, always there, just out of reach, yet always present. This time I didn't gasp. I didn't cry out. A strange, resigned dread settled over me. He was truly everywhere. Every reflective surface was a potential portal for him. A window, a polished tabletop, even the glossy screen of my phone. He was always there, lurking in the depths of my reflected reality. I tried to confront him. Once I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, the lights blazing, my heart pounding, and I shouted at my reflection, "What do you want? Why are you doing this to me?" My reflection stared back, my face pale and drawn. And for a split second, his image superimposed itself over mine, a faint, almost translucent layer. His hollow eyes met mine, and his thin lips stretched into that terrible smile. And again, the silent words echoed in my mind. "You saw me." That was all he ever conveyed. A simple, terrifying statement of fact, a justification for his presence. Because I had seen him, he was now irrevocably connected to me. The past few months have been a living hell. I barely sleep. When I do, it's fitful, haunted by his lingering presence. I avoid going out as much as possible, terrified of catching a glimpse of him in a shop window or a car's rearview mirror. My life has become a constant, desperate game of avoiding my own reflection. I've tried everything: therapists, spiritual healers, even a self-proclaimed exorcist who just took my money and told me to meditate more. Nothing works. He's still there, always watching, always smiling. Sometimes when I'm tired, when my guard is down, I'll catch him unawares. He'll be slightly closer, his features a little clearer, his smile a little wider. It's a slow, insidious progression. He's not just a passive observer anymore. I feel his presence, a cold, oppressive weight that never leaves me. I've started to notice subtle changes in my own reflection. Sometimes my eyes seem a little darker, a little more hollow. My smile, when I force one, feels unnatural, a little too wide, a little too thin. I worry that I'm slowly, imperceptibly becoming him, that he's not just observing but slowly, subtly possessing me. The thought is terrifying. The idea that one day I'll look in the mirror and it won't be my face staring back. It will be his hollow eyes, his gaunt features, his dreadful, silent smile. I'm telling you this, listeners, because I don't know what else to do. I'm isolated, living in a self-imposed prison of my own making. My life has been consumed by this spectral entity, this man in the mirror. I don't know what he wants beyond the simple acknowledgement that I saw him, but that acknowledgement has cost me everything: my peace of mind, my sanity, my very sense of self. And as I speak to you now, sitting here in my darkened room, the only light coming from this microphone, I can feel him. I can feel his presence, a coldness at my back, a prickle on my skin. I can almost hear that silent, rasping whisper in my mind. "You saw me." And sometimes when I'm really alone, when the silence is absolute, I swear I can hear a faint, distant hum, like the fluorescent light in a hotel bathroom late at night. Hum, hum, hum. Always humming, always watching. And I wonder, if he was in that hotel mirror and he followed me home, whose mirror was he in before that? And who will he follow next? Thank you for joining us tonight on Alone. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales. Share this with someone brave enough to listen in the dark. Remember, fear is always closer than you think. Stay tuned, and we'll meet again with another story that might just be true. Subscribe now if you dare.